Oh, look at the planet. It's our mother planet, right? Yes, our own Earth. But why Earth is so special? Earth is the one and only planet known for life. What about the events happening outside our planet? We are not sure about it, right? Yes, but we are aware of the processes and events that happen on our planet Earth. Look at our planet. Oh, it's not completely blue in color. I can find a few stretches of green as well. That means our planet is not fully filled with water. We have lands too. And we have to talk about lands. Why? Because that is where we all are living. So let's find out the importance of land and its conservation. Hey budding charms, I hope everyone is doing well, and we are back with the next one-shot session on the topic called land, soil, water, natural vegetation and wildlife resources. So please pay attention throughout the class and try to take down the important points. So not only that, if you find any kind of doubts in between, please don't hesitate to ask your doubts in the comment box. I'm here to help you out, and this is Aishwarya Sindhu Ramachandran. I'm your geography educator, and if you have not watched chapter 1 and 3 yet, don't worry, I'm going to just pin it here so you can go through it and watch chapter 1 resources and chapter 3 agriculture. And we are going to discuss chapter 2 today, and I hope everyone is so excited to learn this particular chapter because this is going to be a super simple one, but make sure that you write down the important points on your notebook. So let's dive into our contents. So we are going to start off with Earth's population demands, conservation of land resource, soil erosion and landslide, water conservation, and finally vegetation and wildlife conservation. So these are the various topics that we will discuss today. So let's dive into a session without much ado, and now let's get started. So when you look at our planet Earth, 70% is covered with water. The remaining 30% is full of lands. And that's where we all live in. But these days, a lot of exploitations are happening, and our land resources are getting affected too. So we have to talk about its conservation as well. And that is what the main goal of this particular chapter. So let's get into our main context of the chapter here. It's all about the conservation of land resources. Let's start off with the very first concept of Earth's population. As I mentioned before, Earth's lands are not completely occupied by people. There are certain areas where the population is very much concentrated. Which are these areas? Plains and river valleys. Why? Because these areas are suitable for agriculture. Why? Because people need to live. They need to get water, food, and the necessities to lead a good life. So for that, they need to concentrate on these kind of areas. At the same time, there are certain areas on Earth where the population is very, very less. And certain areas can be even found as uninhabitable. So that means these areas are not suitable for people to live and to get the necessities. Which are these areas? Areas with rugged topography, steep mountains, and low-lying areas susceptible to water. So these areas are not suitable for people to live in. So Earth's population is non-uniform, but it is increasing day by day. Now we are going to talk about uses of land. So if you talk about land, the land can be utilized for various purposes. What are these purposes? For agriculture, for forestry, to construct roads, to build houses, and also for mining. So these are the various purposes in which we can make use of a land. But if you talk about the factors determine land use, we have to talk about two different factors. How can we decide whether a place is fit for a particular purpose or not? And that's where we need to give importance to these factors. And these are basically classified into two as physical factors and human factors. What are these physical factors? Soil, climate, minerals, water availability, etc. For example, if you want to cultivate a particular crop in an area, we need to talk about water availability, climatic conditions, the soil fertility, etc. Why? because the crops have to grow really well. For that, these conditions have to be met. But what about human factors? Population, technology, all of these have to be considered too. Now we are going to talk about the different category of lands. Lands are basically classified into two as private land and community land. What are these private lands? These are owned by individuals so that other people have no access to these kind of places to take any kind of resources. Clear? And what about community land? Community land is owned by a community for common uses such as collection of fodder, fruits, nuts or medicinal herbs. So these are controlled by a group of people. That means the community people can benefit from these kind of lands and its resources. It is also known as common property resources. So every person of the community has equal rights to access these community lands. So private lands are owned by individuals, whereas the community lands are owned by community people. So now let's get into the next part. As we all know that population is increasing day by day. So population has certain necessities such as water, food, clothes, etc. So these demands have to be met for a good life. When you look at this, you can see that the land availability is very, very less. So people build commercial spaces and shopping areas in urban areas and expand agricultural land in rural areas. So look at this one. So this expansion can cause certain kind of issues too. What are the basic consequences of expanding these? Let's find out. What are they? So the major threats are land degradation, forest destruction, landslides, soil erosion and finally desertification. So these are the basic consequences of these expansions. What we are going to learn next is all about the conservation of land resource. So due to ever-growing population demands are also increasing day by day. So we have to make use of certain conservation methods so that what happens? We can just protect these land resources. And what are the methodologies? Afforestation, land reclamation, regulated use of fertilizers and pesticides, and regular checks on overgrazing. Afforestation means you are making a place into a tract of land full of trees and plants. And what about land reclamation? In this process, we are going to remove water from the muddy areas so that the level of the lands can be increased. So this is one of the methodologies that we can use to conserve our land resources. What about the next one? Reduction in the usage of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. So when you reduce the amount of these into land, then we can definitely reduce the chemical inputs too. So this can also conserve our land resources to a great extent. What about regular checks on overgrazing? Plants and animals are interdependent on each other, but still it is very much important to have regular check on overgrazing. Why? Because if overgrazing is high, it can also reduce the land resources. Look at this. It's all about results of overexploitation. I told you the population is increasing day by day. Therefore, demands are also increasing. Or the land resources are getting used up very quickly. Because of this, soil erosion and landslides can occur. Soil, right? Yes. So soil is very, very important in our life. Why? Because that's where we all stand on. Soil is a grainy substance made up of organic matter and minerals formed due to the weathering of rocks which covers the earth's surface. So earth's surface is completely covered with soil. But how these soils are formed? Due to the weathering of rocks. What is meant by this weathering? It's a breakdown of rocks. As I told you, weathering of rocks lead to soil formation. But what are the factors affecting it? Let's learn it one by one. So here is the very first one, nature of parent rock. So nature of parent rock decides or determines the color, texture, chemical properties, mineral content and permeability of soil. Similarly, when you talk about climatic factors, temperature, rainfall, rate of weathering and humus formation. And what about topography? Altitude and slope determine the accumulation of soil. And what about time? Time is also very, very important, right? And therefore, it determines the thickness of soil profile. And what is meant by soil profile? It's nothing but the vertical cross-section of soil like this. Clear? So that it can decide the thickness of the soil profile too. Similarly, flora, fauna and microbes affect the rate of humus formation. So these can be considered as various factors affecting the soil formation. Get this? This is soil erosion, right? Yes. So soil erosion is actually happening in many places on earth. But why? There are basic reasons behind it. Deforestation, overgrazing, overuse of chemical fertilizers, rainwash, landslides and floods, all of these are considered as various reasons for soil erosion. But how can we just prevent it? There are certain methods can be used. That's what we are going to learn now, and let's learn it together. So these are the various methods of conservation. What are they? Mulching, contour barriers, rock dam, terrace swarming, intercropping, contour plowing and shelter belts. So the very first method can be called it as mulching. So what is mulching? The bare ground between plants is covered with a layer of organic matter like straw to retain soil moisture. So here we are going to put the organic matter as a layer on the top of soil so that it can retain the moisture level. At the same time, it can also prevent soil erosion to a great extent. Here is the second method. What is it? Contour barriers. Method of building barriers using stones, grass and soil along contours. Trenches are made in front of barriers to collect water. So this is actually a method and building barriers using stones, grass and soil. So we are going to create a barrier using these products. Similarly, we are going to add some trenches to collect water. And what about the third one? Rock dams. You might have seen these kind of rock dams in your life, right? So rocks piled up to slow down water flow and helps to prevent gullies and further soil loss. So soil loss has to be prevented to a great extent. So for that, we can pile up these rocks and construct a structure like this. This can definitely reduce soil erosion to a great extent. Oh, this is very, very common, right? Yes, so terrace farming is one of the best methodologies that can be used to prevent soil erosion. So broad flat steps or terraces made on steep slopes to grow crops reduces surface runoff and soil erosion. So as these are cultivated on steps, the soil erosion can be reduced to a great level. And look at this one, intercropping. Different crops are grown in alternate rows and sowing at different times to protect the soil from rainwash. So when you look at this farm, you can see that different crops are grown in alternate rows. So this is the same method that can be used to protect the soil erosion here. And here is the next one. Contour plowing. Plowing parallel to the contours of hill slope to form a natural barrier. So based on the hill shape itself, the contouring is being done. How? The plowing is done based on the hill slope so that it can create natural barriers like these. Clear? And there are certain pathways are created to remove water out of these farmlands. So this is a method used in contour plowing. So this is also one of the finest methods of preventing soil erosion. And what about shelter belts? Rows of trees are planted to check the wind movement to protect soil cover in coastal and dry regions. So these are predominantly used in coastal and dry regions where rows of trees are planted like these. So these trees can be used to evaluate the wind movement so that the soil cover or the soil layer can be protected. What are landslides? The mass movement of rocks, debris or earth down a slope is known as a landslide. You might have read about the Wayanad landslide happened recently. This made a lot of people lose their life. So landslides are so dangerous, but this can be due to certain reasons. Landslides are always dangerous, but how can we prevent it? That's where we need to understand the importance of mitigation mechanism. So scientific techniques developed to understand the causes of landslide and its management can be called it as mitigation mechanism. In these, there are certain techniques are used. But what are these techniques? Let's learn it one by one. Hazard mapping to locate areas prone to landslides and avoid building settlements. If we get to know about the information regarding areas which are more prone towards these kind of landslides, we can take a step further. Why? Because we can avoid a lot of accidents and disasters not by building settlements over there. And what about the second one? Construction of retention wall to stop the land from slipping. So retention walls can be constructed to avoid landslides like these. Increasing the vegetation cover. We have to plant more and more trees, more and more plants. So these tree roots are going to penetrate deep into the soil and hold on to the soil really well. So this is also one of the techniques that can be used. What about the last one? Introduction of surface drainage control techniques. So proper drainage system constructions also can make a lot of changes in avoiding these kind of landslides. Earth is a planet full of water, but still the usable form of water is very less in quantity. And there are many people who are still facing water scarcity. But what are the basic reasons behind it? Less rainfall, overexploitation of water and water pollution. So these are considered as major reasons for water scarcity. But there are many ways in which we can conserve water. What are they? Increase forest cover, use efficient irrigation methods based on areas, for example, sprinkler system. Equal distribution of water can be made with the help of sprinkler system. So instead of pouring a lot of water into the farmland, we can make use of these kind of efficient methods to reduce the usage of water. Next method, introduce drip irrigation in water scarce areas. Certain areas where the water shortage is very high. So in those areas, only necessary amount of water has to be used. So at this point, we can make use of drip irrigation, in which the water will be given to the farmland as droplets. So these type of techniques can definitely reduce the use of water to a great extent, plus it can also help us to conserve a lot of water. And now we are going to talk about natural vegetation and wildlife. Biotic and abiotic factors are interrelated. What are these biotic factors? Biotic factors are living organisms, whereas abiotic factors are non-living factors of an ecosystem. So these are interrelated in an ecosystem. But when you talk about food chains and food webs, there is also another connection between the organisms or between the living organisms itself, with the plants, within animals, within microorganisms, etc. So in this way, one organism can be food to another one, and therefore this chain goes on and create different food webs. So different food webs can balance the whole ecosystem itself. And the growth of vegetation depends on temperature, rainfall, moisture and climate too. And there are certain threats to vegetation and wildlife. What are they? Deforestation, cutting down of trees, soil erosion, constructional activities, forest fires, tsunami, landslides and poaching. So these are the various threats to vegetation and wildlife. So it's our responsibility to conserve these resources. And how can we conserve it? Using these methods. Awareness programs can be designed. National parks, biosphere reserves and wildlife sanctuaries all work for the conservation of flora and fauna. So now we have come to the part of our summary. So we have discussed many points today. Started with Earth's population, population demands, conservation of land resource, soil erosion, landslide, water conservation, and finally vegetation and wildlife conservation. So these are the various topics that we discussed today, and I hope everyone really liked it. And now it's our responsibility to save our earth. And that's the end of the class. We'll see you next class with an amazing session similar to this. Till then, have a nice day and goodbye everyone.